Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for tuning into this episode of Just Another Tinfoil Hat. I'm your host, Zelia Edgar. The aim of this show is to discuss all aspects of the paranormal, from the relatively mainstream to the downright bizarre, to pose questions and entertain ideas regarding every angle of the unexplained. So hang on to your tinfoil hats, keep your hands and feet inside the saucer, and please enjoy the ride. Tonight, I'm very pleased to introduce my guest. Brian Seech is a researcher and investigator of the unexplained and founder of two research groups, Center for Unexplained Events, CUE, and Center for Cryptozoological Studies, CCS. Brian has appeared on Monsters and Mysteries in America on Destination America, a national cable channel. He was featured on the independent film Mountain Devil: The Search for Frank Peterson, and was an extra in the Mothman Prophecies movie, filmed in Pittsburgh, and has also appeared on various internet radio shows. Brian is a member of the Butler Organization on Research of the Unexplained, BORU. He is a former member investigator of the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, and the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society, PBS. Brian co-wrote articles for the Creature Chronicles column in the Hancock County Courier in West Virginia from August to November of 2013. Brian also is a co-instructor for the first ever cryptozoology class at Eastern Gateway College in Steubenville, Ohio. If you had had an encounter or sighting in Pennsylvania, Ohio, or West Virginia, please contact Brian at centerforcryptostudies@gmail.com. And we'll definitely include that in the description of this video as well. So, Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm really excited for our conversation tonight.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me on. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, well, I know we seriously just spoke like a few weeks ago on Steve Ward's fantastic podcast, The High Strangeness Factor, especially on winged cryptids, and that was definitely an interesting conversation. So, seriously, just super happy to have you on my show tonight. And I guess to start off, I always kind of start my shows asking, how exactly did you get involved with paranormal research? Because, too, I mean, you are heavily involved with many different fields of research here, too, which I just think is absolutely fantastic. So, where did that interest start, and how did you really kind of get out in the field and start getting involved with it?
Basically, since I was a kid, I was interested in UFOs, Bigfoot, strange creatures, ghosts. I spent a lot of time in front of the TV watching horror films and sci-fi. And as I started to get a little bit older, I started to read. At the time in the '70s, there was a lot of UFO magazines out there, like UFO Report and Saga, things like that. And so I just started doing a little bit of research back then on UFOs and Bigfoot, and kind of got out of it for a little while till I met my awesome wife, who's sitting who's sitting over here, and we got after we got married, we found out that we both had an interest in the paranormal, and we formed our first group, which is Q, Center for Unexplained Events. We kind of had that group, and which is still running today. We basically said that it was a clearinghouse for all unexplained phenomena. So we basically started to collect newspaper articles, magazines, everything we could find. We watched everything on TV, bought the videos, and we started to actually doing a lot of field research in 2000. Is when we joined the PA Bigfoot Society, and we started to do a lot of cryptid research. And we also were both members of MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and we were both field investigators. My wife was a state section director for about 3 or 4 years, and we basically in 2012 we formed our second group, which is the Center for Cryptozoological Studies. We formed that so we could take all of any cryptid report and move it specifically into that group instead of just being Q, which is kind of a generic term, Center for Unexplained Events, for all events. We just wanted to put the word crypto in there, so we could kind of get more reports, and it's worked a lot better than just having Q. We still have Q. We still do all of our paranormal research, UFO research, and any other kind of research underneath that group.
Well, I think that name is really actually very interesting and evocative that you went with unexplained events too, because so often um, that's kind of what these occurrences are when people have a sighting that they can't explain. It is kind of like an event. There's a whole occurrence that these people are privy to. So I think that's really neat. But two, that's really fantastic that both you and your wife are involved in this because I know there are a lot of people out there who don't really have many people that they can share this interest with. And I know I'm fortunate enough where my family is very open to the paranormal. And so, I got to grow up and have that support. But a lot of people aren't so lucky. So that is really cool.
Oh yeah, my wife is just as much interested in it, and I always tell people when I give a presentation or something that she's like the heart and soul of the group. She runs it. She really does run the groups, and I'll say, "Hey, can you get this presentation for me, or do this or that?" And she does it, and but she's always kind of like in the background all the time. But definitely couldn't do without her.
Man, very, very cool. So I have to ask too, because so often too, these people who have an interest with the paranormal, they've also had their own experiences. Have you had any experiences with any aspect of the paranormal, or has it solely been the interest?
Well, I've had a couple. I've had a couple experiences, which I would call ghostly phenomenon, and several UFO encounters. Still, have never seen a Bigfoot yet or any kind of cryptid. We've heard some strange screams in the woods. Unfortunately, we've never seen what was making that scream.
Mm.
That's kind of my goal in the cryptid anyway, is to at least maybe catch a glimpse of Bigfoot, just to kind of prove to that young kid in the '70s that the Bigfoot creature does exist.
We are in the same boat there. I've had many experiences with, what would be termed ghostly phenomena and definitely a few sightings of UFOs. And cryptids are the holdout. And it's the same for my mom. She is a Bigfoot enthusiast. That's
Hmm.
actually how I became involved with the field, really, was her interest in Bigfoot kind of led me into a more like pronounced research into the paranormal at large. And that's the one holdout, and so it is true. It's kind of like the holy grail for me is just catching a glimpse of, Bigfoot, man wolf, seriously, whatever, as long as it could be termed a cryptid, man, I'll take
Yep.
it. But so like, okay, so the ghostly phenomenon, like, did you live in a house that was haunted, or was this kind of like just at random? Be interested to hear about that.
Well, actually, we also do some paranormal research.
Oh,
One of
okay.
the, yeah, one of the first experiences I had is I was working at a local store part time, and I was working at night, and I would have to go in the back of the store and go down a hall, and I had to shut the lights off. So this one particular week, I think it was like the second or third week I was there. I worked 2 nights, so I went back there. I go to round the corner where these lights are, and I out of the peripheral, I see like a shadow. It almost looked like a person, but it was all dark. And I looked, and the lights were on back there until I shut them off. But and I hurry up and turn around. I'm like, wow, I thought somebody was there. So and then later on in the week, I had to shut them off again. So I'm going back there again, and same thing. I see out of the the peripheral of my eye, I see something, and it looks like a figure, real quick, really brief, and you kind of get like goosebumps up and down your arm. So that next day that I worked the next day, and I asked my boss, I said, I got to ask you something. Have you seen anything weird in this store? She was there about a year. She goes, oh, that's the ghost. We call him George. But apparently
That
it
is awesome.
was, yeah, just the way she said it. Oh yeah, that's the ghost. We call him George. And I pointed. I said, did you see him back there? And she says, oh yeah, all the time. Like matter of factly.
Oh,
And then
man.
another time we would do some investigations. We did one up in a church in Erie, and uh, Terry, myself, and another gentleman who was, I guess he was a father there, right? He was a parishioner there, the pastor. So it was a church that was allegedly haunted. Okay, so we went up to the church. We're looking around. There was uh, claimed they saw a shadow figure up on the first floor, and actually, when one of the secretaries was working there, some books would fly out, just would pop out and just fall on the floor. So he took us downstairs to the basement. It was like a little rec room, and we went around this corner. He was showing us the old foundation of the church. So we started taking pictures, and all of a sudden we hear footsteps coming down the steps. And then there was two doors there, and one of them had, like, how do you explain it? It had like, what would you call it, Terry? Like a push bar. So we hear boom, 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 and then the push bar starts rattling. And there was nobody in the church because it was in the evening and the whole church was locked down. He's the only one that had the key. So we go right around the corner, boom, nothing. There was nothing there, but all three of us heard it, just plain as day. Steps and then boom, 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 boom. And uh, that was all that happened that night. But I just thought we were like looking at each other and like in shock because there was definite footsteps and that door, and we were around the corner from the door, but we weren't that close to it. And there was no way that as soon as we went there, when the knocking stopped, no one could have ran up them steps that quick. No one else was in there. And then I'll give you one more, and that was it. A private home, and Terry and one of the homeowners and another lady who was running a ghost group at the time. They went in the house, so I was out in the yard with the gentleman of the house, and we're talking. And you ever see those plastic pools that you fill them up with water, but they have like a rounded thing all the way around? So
Yeah.
we're talking to him, and all of a sudden, like right next to both of us, there was like a indentation of a V, and it went all the way down, and water starts spewing out of it, like almost as if something or somebody was there pushing on it.
Oh my gosh.
And it was not me or the gentleman there. We're just looking at each other stunned, and it happened maybe I'm trying to maybe about 6 or 7 seconds, and then it started to rise back up. It didn't pop back up. It was rising back up really slow, almost like there was a force or something was there pushing it down, and all the water was starting to gush out of it. And then as it started to rise back up, the water stopped, and that was just amazing to us. I mean, to me, Terry was inside; she didn't see it, but it was just like I was standing there, like, wow, it wasn't this guy. He was as shocked as I was, and there's no way anything else could have uh, put pressure on there and then have the water, have it come back up and the water stop. So those are my three ghostly happenings.
Man, that is truly amazing. Like, geez, that's so neat. And I love too, because I've heard of some people too where, there's going to be like a ghost at the establishment or something. And it's so interesting to see the response of people because yeah, some people get really freaked out by stuff like this, but then other people are just matter of factly, yeah, that's George. Like that is just
Yeah,
gold.
that was funny.
But speaking of like, witness response, I guess, something that I've really noticed with people is that, yeah, there are some people who are really pragmatic about the paranormal in a way, where it's like if it doesn't intrude on their life too much, they just kind of move on, you know. But then other people, sometimes it just seems like when they see something that doesn't fit into their worldview, it's almost like the entire paradigm shifts for them and they kind of have to refit how they perceive reality. Do you see that a lot? Like kind of just a mix of you know, people responding that way?
Oh, exactly. Both we've seen like especially in these two Bigfoot instances that the eyewitnesses claimed they've seen these creatures, and that was incidentally both in the 70s. And when we had talked to these people, it was like in the mid 2000s. So you're talking what 30 some years, 35 years. They both did the same thing. They says they both they grabbed their arms, and all of a sudden there was goosebumps up and down their arms, and they're like caressing their arms. The one gentleman who saw when he was playing in his room, he saw movement out of the corner of his eye, and he was in a trailer, and this big creature, this Bigfoot creature, walked. And the interesting thing, it walked by the right in the middle of the mirror or the window. It stopped. It looked at him, and he says, this creature looked at me, and it seemed startled. He says, right after the creature saw me, then his eyes went red. He says his eyes weren't red when he looked at me, but his eyes turned red when he looked at me, which I thought was really interesting. And
Wow.
he put his arms together and he said, "Ooh," he went like, "Ooh," he says, I still get chills. And that was like in the early 70s. And this guy was big. He was a big guy. It wasn't and he still had a profound effect from something that happened like 35 or 40 years prior. So yeah, I've seen that. And I've also seen other people who say, yeah, I saw it. I saw a creature. I saw a UFO. I wasn't scared, but I was like so transfixed that they didn't know, it happens. Most of these encounters, as you know, they happen so quick.
Mm.
You know, there's not a lot of them where you're seeing an object or a creature for an extended period of time, and just the people's reaction. Some are not, and some are like, "Oh my god, I can't, I can't believe this." One of the we had a dog man witness. We were actually at a party, and we were talking about actually Linda Godfrey. We were talking about her and the dog man. And this guy's looking at me, looking at me. He comes over. He goes, "I heard you talking. What you were talking about?" I said, "Werewolves." And then he goes, "Ah, that's what I saw. I saw that in Westmoreland County. I saw it. It was on the side of the road. It stood up. It ran across the road, and it went under this chain link fence where there was a power substation." And he
Oh,
was just
wow.
like, he goes, I could never tell this to anybody. They think I'm crazy, and you guys are here talking about werewolves." And I just thought he was one that was just like, you could tell he had repressed memories, but when he heard somebody else talked about it, it brought it to light, and then he was able to talk about it.
Man, that is simply amazing. And, it's so unfortunate too, because I think that more people than not at some point during their lives will experience something that they can't explain, something that falls under this very large, very strange umbrella of paranormal phenomena. And it's so odd, given that, I think that's the case, which I'd love to get your thoughts on, that it is still relegated to the fringe. I know that there's more of a pop culture interest in the paranormal now than there was in years past, but still, it's considered something that you don't really, most people don't really want to talk about so much.
Yeah, it actually is a lot. A lot of it still is in the fringe, but it has been gaining popularity. I say in the last 10 to 15 years with all the shows like Finding Bigfoot and some of the UFO shows out there. But even just today, I'll give you an example. One of my bosses, he goes, "Oh, because I took the day off tomorrow," and he says, "So, what you gonna do? Go look for Bigfoot tomorrow?" I said, "No, actually, I'm gonna sleep in and kind of relax all day." I just thought it was funny. "Hey, you're gonna go look for Bigfoot on your day off." I'm like, "Well, not tomorrow. Maybe later."
It's so funny because I once had to ask off from a retail job for a weekend. I actually did want to go on a Bigfoot expedition. And so,
Mm.
of course, you have to kind of state your business, state why you want the days off. And so I put that down. And my boss straight up looked at me and was like, "I don't know any other boss that would give you the day off for Bigfooting." And I was like, "Well, that's very judgy of you. Thanks."
That's funny.
But, no, so it's true. I do think that we are coming to a point where the interest garnered by the television shows especially is kind of making this more approachable, but I do think we are still, a very long way off with making it acceptable, and
Mhm.
not, you know, kind of like the end of the newsreel, kind of butt of the joke situation.
Yep. Yep.
But would you agree with that, concept that it's the majority of people, just in the world who will have some sort of experience, or do you think that this is kind of more a rare phenomena?
I don't know if it's a majority, but I think there's always kind of like that unwritten thing about Bigfoot is you might have as many sightings as are reported. There's 2 or 3 times more that people will never come and tell you about. I've uh, I've had a couple people say, "Hey, I saw something," and I'm like, "Hey, do you want to talk about it?" In our groups, we want you to fill out a sighting report form. And they're like, "Well, no, I don't want to. I'll just tell you real quick. I don't want to, or yeah, I don't want to talk about it now." I had somebody who
Mm.
claimed they saw a dog man in Mercer County about a month ago. At first, they wanted to talk, and then I says, "Hey, I can send you the forms. I don't want to talk about it anymore." So, if I could have, if we could have got all the reporting forms, reports from people who claim they've seen something to actually put it down on paper and have me interview them, we would have 5 times as many reports on everything as we do now. But people are
Wow.
still just they want to go so far, but not all the way with it. So it is kind of frustrating because we're in it to get reports to go look at areas and to get more information on whatever phenomena we're researching.
Yeah, no kidding. And I imagine too that, when you only have, say, a fifth of the people even coming forward and talking about it who want to actually fill out the reports, that's going to make a difference to any, large scale studies of like different phenomena coalescing or, areas having this many numbers of sightings. That's going to affect all of those numbers.
Mhm.
Man, that is unfortunate. So just real quick too, while we're on the topic of witnesses, something that I have a major interest in is the concept of repeater witnesses, especially, people who may have sightings of different types of paranormal phenomena throughout their lives. Do you run across that very often in your studies?
We do run across, maybe not as often as you would think, but we do run across people who, hey, I've had some UFO act, I've seen a couple UFOs. Also, I've seen a Bigfoot, and some even, hey, I saw a ghost with all of this. And others, it's like, nope, I just had this one chance encounter. Driving down the road, this thing runs across the road, or I look up in the sky and I see something floating by. I didn't know what it was, but um, I believe at least a lot more people actually have had at least one of those three experiences, especially ghosts. So many people have told me ghost stories, and hey, I've had encounters just in the passing. We never really, uh, you know, when we research ghosts, we don't have a ghost form or anything like that. We just, hey, that house is haunted. I grew up in a house that was haunted. I hear that a lot, especially around our area. I grew up in a house that was haunted, or hey, this happened to me. This happened to me. People seem to be more apt to talk to you about ghosts than any phenomenon.
No, I've noticed that too. For some reason, it seems that ghosts, I don't know, tend to be just a little bit more acceptable to talk about, which is something I've always tried to understand. I just, yeah, and kind of on the sliding scale of acceptability, I feel like ghosts are on the almost okay end. And unfortunately, Bigfoot is kind of on the exact opposite, with
Yes,
UFOs
yes,
kind of somewhere in the middle.
yeah, I agree
It's just,
exactly. So I agree with you.
yeah, it's just goofy. Why it's like that. I'm not exactly sure why. But it's odd too because I know that I've spoken to several people who always cite Bigfoot as being kind of like the odd one out for the paranormal, also being one of like the biggest, I would say one of the poster children of the paranormal. I mean,
Hmm.
it's such a huge phenomena and it's so widespread, especially, in the United States. And of course, we have all of the different related entities worldwide. So
Hmm.
that's just odd to me that it is often kind of made fun of. Very unfortunate.
Yeah, many people who research Bigfoot actually bristle at the term paranormal if you lump Bigfoot in with it, and a lot of people don't. A lot of researchers. No, no, no. This is an animal only, and it belongs in a cryptozoological field.
Yeah, I know that division is definitely still around. And,
Mhm.
of course, I am a major fan of John Keel. I can't go
Uh-huh.
through an episode of anything without mentioning his name at least once. And, I'm a big fan of the concept that there are patterns between each different type of paranormal, or, if we're going to include that division, cryptozoological phenomena, that they seem to bear a lot of similarities, especially in witness effect and other effects like that. So, do you see that, like, with Bigfoot, that they have these kind of patterns and similarities across paranormal phenomena?
There are some. Uh, a good friend, Fred Saluga, always says that they're all from the same tree. Ghost UFOs and Bigfoot are all from the same tree. Um, Maybe they're all one phenomena. Whether I know, I like John Keel too, and I've read some of his books about the ultra terrestrial hypothesis, and so there is a lot of crossover on some of the effects, what happens to people, and how they feel afterwards. When you get into UFOs, the abduction phenomena before, they say the abduction phenomena. Well, it was actually like the fairy phenomenon. People would go into the woods, see these little fairies, and they'd be missing, and they'd come back, and so a lot of it, maybe a lot of it all does somehow that we actually can grasp yet. Uh, Somehow all does interconnect.
Yeah, and the truth is too is that, because I, of course, am a big fan of the ultra terrestrial concept, and I think there is quite a bit of evidence for that idea. However, I think too that I'm definitely open to anything. There's the potential for more than one answer to be correct, given any of these different types of phenomena, in my opinion.
Yeah,
So,
and I'm sure you've read the researcher Christopher O'Brien. He talks about like the trickster phenomenon.
oh yes,
Yep.
yeah, and I definitely know that the paranormal really seems to kind of have that kind of coded into it, if that makes sense. There's just so many contradictory um, situations and aspects that occur with it. It is kind of mind-boggling to tell the truth.
Oh, it is. It is. There's a lot, and I know. Excuse me. Steve says that you've done a lot of research, like on Keel and some of the older researchers that 99 or probably 90% of researchers today wouldn't even know the names, let alone what they've written or what they've done. And Steve said that you're definitely a follower of a lot and researcher of a lot of that too.
Oh, yeah, I know, I think that we are both, unofficial parishioners of the Church of John Keel, so,
Yeah.
you know, pretty soon we're gonna print up some pamphlets and start going door to door.
I'm sure Steve would do something
Oh, yeah, yeah. Just waiting on the T-shirts to get printed, I'm sure, but, no, and, it is that concept of the super spectrum and the ultra terrestrial concept really, was mind-blowing to me when I first, came across it. And I think that again, I think there's just multiple correct answers because especially with Bigfoot. Bigfoot, I started as a kid really interested in cryptozoology and, of the flesh and blood variety. And as I moved forward, I still kept those things very separate until I found Keel. Um, man, I really do sound like a convert. Until I found John Keel and he changed
like.
my way of thinking. But no, so Bigfoot for me is still kind of like I have a very deep level of nostalgia for the concept of there being simply some undiscovered animal, that would match that description. But there are so many of these more high strangeness cases where that simply just, you know, that can't be the only answer. Even if it is a partial answer, I feel like, there's got to be more than that.
Yeah, we actually had a really strange case here in our county in 1973. We live in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. And in 1973, there was three girls waiting at a bus stop, and they see the light shimmer in the sky, and all of a sudden they see this white Bigfoot walking with a glowing, luminous sphere in its hand. And so they ran in and got their father. The father went into the woods, and they said he didn't come back until about an hour later. And they said his whole personality changed. He was just like a changed person. He was like more paranoid, and he never would say what he saw in the woods. But they said that he definitely was a changed person after he came out of the woods after seeing this. It was actually a white Bigfoot type creature holding a luminescent sphere. So
Man,
can't get too much weirder than that, huh?
I know, right? Well, and that brings up a fantastic point, which we will have to save for part two of this episode as we're drawing near to the half hour mark, which is something which we both have a common interest in light anomalies. So, we're going to take a quick break and return with part two of this episode in 2 weeks' time, unless, of course, you subscribe to my Patreon account, in which case part two will be up as soon as I'm done talking. And again, we are visiting with Brian Seech.